Hey, we're live. We're live. We're live. We are alive. Well, we're going through the wealth series in the last couple of weeks, and we plan to do that as we're kind of doing thematic stuff to see how you like it. And we got some really good comments. We haven't had any poor comments yet. So if you have comments like, we liked what you and Allie doing before. I kind of been working towards let's do some thematic teaching and more like Q&A, because what happens is I teach all the time, and then people don't have time to interact. So we're trying to create some sort of place where people can feel like they have some access, because what happens during the week is I get all these questions like, oh gosh, I'm normally working 10 hours a day, so don't have a whole lot of time to answer questions. So we're trying to capture some of those. Obviously, we can't answer all of them, and a lot of them are the same questions that different people ask the same question, or very similar. So we're like, okay, we're kind of crafting our weekly Q&As around these common questions and trying to do our best to make you feel heard and also answer your questions. So, we're gonna talk today about practical ways of developing finance. And by the way, I'm not a financial expert. I'm a business guy and an entrepreneur, and obviously a pastor and a leader. So I'm not saying I'm stupid, but I'm also saying I'm not the last word on finance. So, but I do think that I think there are some practical things in the scriptures that we have practiced for years, and that we've really, really prospered in the last 20 years from doing those, especially the last 15. So some of the questions are, what are the practical ways you grow wiser in financial stewardship? And I think, I think it was Solomon who said in Proverbs, yes, he said, if you hang around with wise men, you get wise. You hang around with fools, you become foolish. I think who you surround yourself with matters. And I think the challenge that all of us have is that it's easy to feel jealous of people and actually reject the people that you actually need. Because, if I'm poor and broke, it just makes me feel broker when I'm with someone who's actually did it right, and they're prospering. And, I think it's kind of, human nature to kind of build cases against people who are prospering in areas that I suck at. And then I end up not getting wisdom because I feel intimidated by the very people I need. So I would say, the two things that are common among people that we should be with is that we are jealous of them, and sometimes we're afraid of them. So breach the chicken line, as we say around here all the time. Step over the chicken line and ask for some help. I think that one of the beautiful things that happens in our lives as leaders is that when we sit down with somebody who's hungry to hear what we have to say and who truly values what we have to say, that's always a lot of fun. I wish I had a lot more time to do that, but I was with some folks on Sunday. We had dinner together, and I was sharing with them some things we were learning. They're like, "This is so good. Can we get more of this?" And so, every leader loves to be with people who value what they have to bring. So find some folks that are prosperous and invite them into your life by humbling yourself and saying, "Could you give me some input?" Do you and Kathy use a budget? We used to use a budget extensively. We lived on a very strict budget for the first 20 years of our life, raising kids. When there wasn't, when every single penny mattered because we didn't have anything extra. And, we were in that season for 20 years where, if you bought shoes for one kid, you couldn't buy them for the other. So, and Kathy did, a really cool thing. In fact, I probably should have her on here before. That's a good idea, Rach. Rachel's sitting next to me, helping to guide me. But I think it'd be a great idea to have Kathy on and talk through some of the budget ideas, because she did things like doing a monthly menu, and then on that she would buy things in bulk for that menu, and then also develop it so that the leftovers for one meal would be the stew, and the next she'd make stew out of the next thing, and pot pies out of things that were left over, and that's just, we live very frugally. So No, I don't live on too much of a budget anymore because I have. And it's probably I should. I know guys on our team like David Stein, who's just a wizard with finance, and they live on a very strict budget, even though they're quite well to do. So I think it's a great thing to do. I just need to be honest and know. And do we save? Yes, we put money away. We have it automatically taken from our bank account. I mean, I think it's like I don't have to think about it. It just goes in every month to different things, and then also we're like it's our goal to give half of our profit away. So I think we're close to that most years. May even be over that sometimes, but yeah, that's our goal, to give away half of our profit. Can't really give away half your revenue, and I think there's for those of you that are in business, I see people tithing sometimes off of their revenue, and that's fine if all your revenue is profit. But for example, our business before we left, I think the last year we did $4.5 million, and there was a $200,000 or $300,000 profit. So 5% about. So if I tied 10% on revenue, I would actually be tithing. I'd actually be tithing money I didn't make. So I think it's important in the business world to understand that tithing off of revenue is, for most businesses, impossible. And I think it's important we tithe off of profit. Same thing with ministry, really, because we have a lot of expenses in ministry. Like even what we're doing right now has an expense to it. I have 2 people working right now, taking care of sound and actually developing the whole what we're going to do every week. So there's expense there. And then, our products, like books, cost money. So we may sell, $300,000 worth of books and have a $150,000 profit. So I think that's important that you know there is a difference. How would you balance risk and faith in finances versus safety and not be stupid? I think that is a really great question. And I think it's a question that I ask on a regular basis of myself. And I think, maybe this isn't the best advice, but let me give you some of the way I think. When you're younger, like you're in your 20s and 30s, and, for me, it's easier financially to take a risk because I always think, well, if we fail, it's easy to, we're young enough to rebuild our lives. And I think that as we've gotten older, I'm 68 years old, going towards 69. And so, our goal, one of our major financial goals was to leave an inheritance to our children's children. So I'm not thinking I'm risking my money. I'm thinking I'm risking theirs. So I think that's, and I don't have to try to think like that. It's just the way I think. And I want to make sure that Kathy and I are living to actually leave them an inheritance, to give them something. So I'd say, the question is around how do you balance risk and faith? I think that for me, where I had a lot of eggs in the high risk, high reward basket. Like, yes, we're going to risk this, but if this prospers, it's going to give us a 10 times revenue back and ROI, and then, now I'm a lot more like, I have a couple of eggs in that basket. Like I have a couple of eggs in the, high risk, high reward, big ROI, but big risk. But most of my money, my best investment right now, I think some of you understand this, my best investment right now is actually in our own ministry. For example, a lot of times the publishers will, they'll take one type of your book out of print, like they'll take the hard copy out of print or whatever, and they'll offer them to us for like just peanuts compared to what we usually pay. And I always buy all those up. And so we have warehouses of our books, but we know we'll sell them. And that's, some of those are, even if we sell them at a discount, they're 10 times a profit compared to where am I going to make that anywhere else and not without some huge risk, So investing in our own ministry. And then for us, this doesn't monetize well, but we're working hard to get, all of our children in their first house, our grandchildren, I should say. We've helped our children, now working with our grandchildren, helping them get in their first house. Because as I think this is probably a question on here, but when you have the kind of inflation that we have right now, you kind of have to get on that train, because what happens is that with inflation, if you put $100,000 in the bank and you have inflation of 7%, and let's say you make 2% on your money, which is about common right now, or 3% on your money, that $100,000, it gained 3%. So, what's that? $3,000, but it lost 7%. So, you lost $4,000 just having it sit there. Where if you have a product like real estate, or something that is moving with up with inflation, and you have a house that's let's say paid for, and inflation goes up by 7% one year, your house value goes up 7%, not 1% or 2%. So, and then, let's say it goes up for 5 years and then levels off. Well, that you sell that house, it's 7% one year, let's just say 5%, 5%, 5%, 5%, 5%. So 25% over, let's say 5 years, you sell that house for 25% more than you paid for it. And, and of course you have some costs in the sale, but maybe you net 20%, where you put money in the bank. It's very likely that you'll lose 20% with inflation. And so, and then, we have a 401k that's in a diverse kind of portfolio. I don't have, I'm not a great stock guy. So there's several people on our team that are good stock investors. That wouldn't be me. So I won't give you advice around the stock market. Is the stock market going to crash or not crash? Let me say this, if we have another depression like the 30s, the only thing that is going to survive that is, possessions like gold or silver, and maybe, house prices would drop in the depression. And the other thing that someone mentioned to me the other day, and I actually think there's some wisdom in this, speaking about buying houses right now. Interest rates are high right now, but the prices are beginning to drop. Now, I don't know. I'm not saying anything prophetically on this call that I know of, but so as it's harder and harder for people to buy houses because interest rates go up. Obviously, the idea of raising interest rates is that house prices and let's say commodity prices, retail prices will drop, because it's harder for people to obtain loans for them. And then as they drop, of course, then we have deflation. We have the balancing out of inflation. So, if you buy a house right now, or let's say a year from now, as inflation continues to grow and interest rates continue to drop, inflation grows and interest rates rise, what I'm trying to say. You get a house at 8%, which just sounds ridiculous. By the way, 8% was a pretty good loan, 15 years ago. And then you buy that house, and the house rises with inflation. And then, 3 years from now, when they drop the interest rates, because they will, it always works that way. When inflation starts to curve, then interest rates over the next 2 or 3 years will drop. Then you refinance, and you have the house you bought at a better price, and then you can refinance your loan. So obviously you have to be able to afford those things. How do you steward property? How do I steward property I don't own, but I'm renting? Well, Jesus said a statement that I think is profound. I said it to the students. I read it to the students the other day out of, I think it was the book of Matthew. Jesus said, if you're not a good steward of what's someone else's, who will give you your own? And I said to the students, like, one of the best strategies to own your own home is to be an amazing renter or leaseor. And I really do believe that what you do for others will come back to you. And that's all through the scriptures. Is all debt bad? And can I use it to build wealth? Well, the guru on these subjects is Dave Ramsey. And he is a friend of mine. We're not like close buddies, but Dave Ramsey would say all debt's bad. I would say, you can't go wrong with that with that kind of advice. But, I personally, I think that there's the kind of debt that actually builds wealth, as I just shared with you. The challenge is, and I think this is probably Dave's point, the challenge is that anytime you owe money to anyone, that if there is a serious downturn in the economy, I mean, you could be stuck with a house that's not worth the money that you owe on it, a car that's not worth the money you owe on it. And so, and also remember that if you buy a house for cash, well, let's say this, if you buy a house on a 30-year note, you should multiply the payments. Like, just take your house payment and multiply it times 30 and see how that equation works against what you think you paid for that house. So let's say you buy a $300,000 house and you multiply the payment out over 30 years, you're going to find out that you paid about, $600,000 at least for that house. And so, the question is, at the end of 30 years, paying for that house for 30 years, is that $300,000 house in itself going to be worth $600,000 in 30 years? And of course, what's going to happen is you're going to say, well, I paid that loan down, but actually you're paying a ton of interest on that loan. So if you buy a house on payments, I mean, one of the things Kathy and I have done for the last 15 years, anytime we've bought real estate, is we always pay more than the loan requires, so that you're paying, because everything you pay above your loan payment goes directly to principal and dramatically reduces the overall amount of money that you owe. So I do think there are places to use money in a debt way. I was in business for years. We floored all of our flooring. We financed most of our products at in those days 5%, and the product had like a 70% margin in it. So. And at the time, if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be in business. But I think it's good, even in business, to take 10%. Like I always like to say, live on 80%. I think I said that in the our last webcast. Like, live on 80%, take 10% and tithe, so you make God your partner, and take 10% and you can reduce your debt with it, is the best thing to do. And build a nest egg for those tough days. Any thoughts on how to handle almost $100,000 or more of student loan? Well, just pay it off. I mean, I really am highly against student loans being forgiven. There's no such thing as free money. So, if student loans forgiven, it means somebody who chose not to go to college, chose not to make an agreement to pay for college, is actually paying your debt. So taxpayers, who are you and me, are paying for people who said, yeah, I'll pay $100,000 or $500,000 to be a doctor. And then, what happens is that when the government forgives your note, I mean, the school doesn't forgive your note. So it's like somebody has to pay that. So I think just work hard to pay it off. And is there such thing as giving away too much money? The answer to that is yes and no. I think that you have to give, sower has seed and then you have fruit. So I think it's good to give off the fruit, but not give away the seed. If you give away the seed, then there's no fruit. And if there's no fruit, then you're not creating an ecosystem where there is something to give. So, think about the farmer. The farmer had, if he had 100 tons of, let's say he had 2 tons of seed, he's going to eat some of that seed, or he's going to starve. But if he doesn't keep some of that seed to replant next year, then he's not going to have a crop for the next year. So I think that's Psalms 126, where he sowed in tears so he could reap with a joyful harvest. It's like he sowed in tears. Sometimes you have to sow in tears because you have to plant the seed you need to eat, and so you kind of going hungry for a season to make sure you have a harvest. So, yes, I think there is a way to give too much. The goal's motive. It's not so much about giving too much as it is about making sure that you have a long-term plan. So if I understand the difference between seed and fruit, and I understand that if I am a good steward of what God's given me, I'm always tithing. I'm always giving away 10%, always, because I don't get to keep that. But if I give away 10, I tithe my 10%, and then from there I have 90%, and I have to make sure that there's seed for the next 10 years. So like if I give away all my seed, I give away all my investment money, I give away any way that I'm investing, giving to receive, then I'm actually giving away my future fruit. So yes, it probably inspires a great conversation. Is investing in land and home? I think I talked about that already. How do you know if your heart's in the right place? Is it okay to be happy about making a lot of money? You should be, I'm right now in my own devotional life going through Proverbs because the Lord said, be ready. The kings are coming. So I'm like, well, Proverbs was written by a king for kings. He said, for example, if you sit at the table of a leader or a king, put a knife to your throat, don't desire his delicacy. So I'm like, what a better way to get ready for the king's coming than actually studying the book of a king wrote for other kings. So I think that it's important to be, so thankful for what the Lord prospers you, how the Lord prospers you. I think it's like, I think gratitude / thanksgiving, which are basically the same thing, having an attitude of thanksgiving inoculates you from all sorts of things. And I think that, being in a season where God's prospering you, if you're prospering, what you shouldn't do is say, aren't I amazing? I don't mean you should go, I suck, but you should say, God and I make great partners. God and I make great partners. I'm the mouse, he's the elephant. We cross the bridge together, and we say, well, and I say, didn't we shake that bridge? But, the bridge shaker is the elephant. And if I make God my partner, and we prosper financially, we're talking about finances right now, but you can prosper in so many ways that are more important than money. But we prosper, I say, man, God and I, we make great partnership. Like he leads, guides, and motivates people. And I listen, I learn, and I basically invest where he tells me to invest. And I'm the boots on the ground, so to speak. I'm the hard worker in the field, as Proverbs says. I'm the guy who doesn't make stupid investments. I'm the person who, doesn't hang around with fools financially, at least. And out of his instruction, we prosper, and the kingdom prospers. And I should be, in a good way, proud of that. And I don't mean in an arrogant way, but in a good way. It's like God and I, we make great partners. Well, hey, I pray right now that you would prosper, as 3 John said, that you would prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. Thanks for hanging with us. Please do comment, because I read every single comment that's on Instagram and Facebook, especially on these lives, to get an idea. So does my team. I have 2 gals, both named Rachel. They read over the comments, and it's partly how we set up the next week's live, so that we are actually talking to things you actually care about. Well, God bless you. Have a very wonderful week. It's raining here in Redding. It's beautiful. Thank you for joining us. God bless.